So we've been in the last few weeks in this sermon series going through the book of Nehemiah. And as we've gone through this book, what we've discovered is that there is a gentleman named Nehemiah who has been a cupbearer for the king in Persia, Artaxerxes. He receives news that Jerusalem is in dire straits. They are in trouble and disgrace specifically. Trouble because the walls have been torn down. There was nothing to protect them. They have been disgraced because as a people, they have become very compromised in their faith, and they began to adopt the faith practices of other religions and other people groups that surrounded them. Nehemiah's heart breaks over this news, and he knows that he must go back to Jerusalem to help be a solution to this problem. And so he gets permission to do so, and he goes back to Jerusalem, and he has come into Jerusalem with a plan for how he is going to help to rebuild the wall around the city, in essence, to help rebuild the city. But not just rebuild the city, but also rebuild the people as well. And so he comes into Jerusalem, he assesses the situation over a few days, he takes his plan, he cross-references that with the situation that is actually in Jerusalem, and he comes up with a final plan. And he casts a vision for the people there in the city, and he tells them, he basically says, he's like, I know you don't realize what the situation that you are in, but this isn't good. And God has so much in store for you, more in store for you. He has so much more in store for Jerusalem, the city of his, and we have to get to work. And he challenges them with that to focus specifically on rebuilding the wall that surrounds the city. And he takes a great team, and he brings that team together, and he organizes them, and with that, a wall would begin to be built. Great team. It took a great team, as we will see, to do just that. I was doing some research this past week on great teams that we're very new to Denver, and so I say you just because you've been here longer than I have. But you have been great teams that you've been able to experience in the sports world here in Denver. Specifically with the professional sports, you've got basketball, hockey, you've got football, and then you've got baseball. And I just want to play a little game with you, and then I'll tie it back into where we're going with the passage of Scripture here. But the game is, I just wonder if you know what the best sports teams for each of those sports is for here in the city of Denver, for baseball, basketball, hockey, and then what's the other one? Basketball, baseball, football, hockey. All right, I'll name it eventually. But let me ask you, if you get within a year or so of this, just say the year, okay? But do you know what the best Denver Nuggets basketball team was here? It's considered, I've done quite a bit of research on this. Wikipedia. Kidding. No, I did do a good amount of research on this. Best Denver Nuggets season. Anybody got a guess on the year? 94. Wow. Did you have a team in 94? I'm kidding. No, I know you did. No, actually, according to what I read, was that the 2008-2009 team is considered to be the best team. And I know you can argue about all these teams. I get that. But 2008-2009 was considered the best team. They had, you had Carmelo Anthony, you had Nene, you had Kenyon Martin, J.R. Smith, Chris Anderson. But the key to the team was Chauncey Billups. 4 games into the season, you traded Allen Iverson. You got to Detroit, you got Chauncey Billups. He came in, and the talent was there on this team. They just didn't have the leadership. And Chauncey comes in, and he says, hey, we got to quit going through the motions in practice. You guys can't wear 5 necklaces while you're practicing, okay? That was stuff that was going on. You can't drink before a game. And so he offered them some leadership. They got their act together, and they made it to the Western Conference Finals, lost to the Los Angeles Lakers, who, if I'm not mistaken, ended up winning the championship that year. And, they had a really good team. The best Colorado Rockies team, what's the year? If you get within a year or so, you're good. 07, yeah, you made your World Series run. Now, what's interesting about that team, the players on that team is that they were unknown talent. People really, there was some guys on the team that would become stars, but nobody really knew who they were. And if you're not familiar with baseball, they make quite a bit of sort of what you might say changes or modifications to the other teams will make adjustments to beat you. They'll get used to you, and so the year over year If you're an unknown talent, though, they don't know to do that. And so the Rockies, like they had all these guys that were incredibly talented, but nobody knew about it. They didn't know how to exactly pitch to them or how to deal with them, perhaps if they were being pitched to by them. And so this team came together, and they just gave opponents fits, and they made a great World Series run in 2007. Your best Denver Bronco team. I heard 97, 98. The 98 team is actually considered the best Denver Bronco team. You had Terrell Davis rushing for over 2,000 yards, John Elway's last year, the back-to-back Super Bowls, great times here in the city. But when people describe the qualities of that team, the number one quality that came out was confidence. While they were the same players in many cases as the 97 team, they came into 98 just believing that they were going to beat everybody. And there was thought that they might beat everybody, and then they ended up losing 2 games, but they just rolled through the playoffs and just destroyed every team. It was just confidence. They believed that no matter what, they were going to win. And what's the best Colorado Avalanche team? Anybody? 2001. That's it. 2001. There was some great players, great leadership. Ray Bork, Joe Sakic, Peter Forsberg. But the key was Patrick Waugh, arguably the greatest goalie ever to play in the NHL. But here's why it was a key, though. The coaches adjusted their strategy, and they were very offensive-minded with their players, and so that compromises your defense. And NHL is very defense-oriented. And so they were having a great emphasis on the offensive side of the ice, pushing to get goals because they had arguably the greatest goalie behind them. And so he more than made up for the lack of players or help that he had. And so they're focusing on offense, and they know they got Patrick Waugh back there, so they're going to be okay. And here's the point, is that they really leaned into and leveraged his greatness. And so I did this research, and I was looking at these great teams. It was amazing to me. You know, the great teams consisted of often great teammates. And there were teammates that would demonstrate great qualities that the team needed, and they came together to often win a championship, or at the very least to compete for a championship. And here's how this relates to Nehemiah chapter 3. I don't know if you've ever read Nehemiah chapter 3. It's just a list of names. It's just names after name after name, and son of this person and son of that person. But in the midst of that, though, you see these qualities that come out of certain individuals that were a part of this team. And as you see these qualities come out, you realize that is what, you realize some certain qualities that create a great teammate. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today as we go through Nehemiah chapter 3. And we're going to look at many of the people who helped to rebuild the wall there. And we're going to look at some of their qualities that allowed them to be great teammates, what ultimately allowed them to be a great team that rebuilt this wall, this task that for decades nobody could get accomplished, but they were able to. And so what is a great teammate? Who is a great teammate? Well, as we talk about Nehemiah 3, we're also going to be applying that to us here. You know, we've been going through some different renovations here, an upgrading at our facility and some ministries that we've been moving forward with. And with that, we've had people just putting in hours, countless amounts of hours. And so what Nehemiah does in Nehemiah 3 is he basically recognizes and he appreciates the people who helped to rebuild this wall. And that's what I'm also going to do as well. I'm going to just recognize some people. And you don't have to stand up or anything, but I'm going to be saying names. And we're going to be appreciating some of the people that poured into this facility to help to do some of the things that we have done, and there's still much that we still need to do. But what's interesting is I told people I was going to do this. I said, okay, I'm going to just give me, I was telling some of our staff and volunteers, I said, just give me as many names as you possibly can of people that have helped. And they said, and I told them what I was going to do, and you know what every one of their responses was? What if you forget somebody? What if you forget somebody? And I'm like, well, what am I supposed to do? Like not appreciate anybody? Because there might be a name that doesn't get to me? And what Nehemiah does, I mean, he dealt with the same challenge. And so often he generalizes and he just says the men of Jericho, the men of Tekoa. I mean, he doesn't mention every name. And so, you know, as I mention names, and I think I've got about 60 or so names I'm going to mention. You know, if I don't mention your name, I please be gracious. It's nothing personal. But we want to appreciate you. And then also as we go through the scriptures in Nehemiah 3, I'm confident this text doesn't get preached on very often. And so some of the names that are in there I have cut out, not to take away from the meaning of the text, but like I'm not going to mention parents and grandparents of people. They were unnecessary. And so if you're following along, you'll notice some of that. And as I'm mentioning names, I'm going to have a lot more notes up here than I normally do just because I want to make sure I hit as many of you as I possibly can. So we're going to pick up in Nehemiah chapter 3. And as we do, we're going to discover what it means to be a great teammate. And we're taking a systematic approach through this text. It won't be verse by verse. We're going to bounce around and we'll hit most of the verses. The men of Jericho built the adjoining section, and Zechor built next to them. The next section was built by the men of Tekoa. Next to them, repairs were made by men from Gibeon and Mizpah. The valley gate was repaired by Hanan and the residents of Zanoah, and they rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. They also repaired 1,000 cubits of the wall as far as the dung gate. Everyone mentioned in those verses does not live in Jerusalem. You have Jericho, the men of Jericho, they were 15 miles away. Tekoa, 12 miles away. Zanoah, 13 miles away. And in this day, that was a very significant distance to travel to do work. And what these people do, though, is they set aside their own personal interest and their personal space, and they realize and they pour themselves into something greater. They realize that their commitment to the people, the Jewish people, is greater than their commitment to themselves. Their commitment to God is greater than their commitment to their little space. They have a view of the big picture. And they realize, yeah, Jericho might be stronger if I stay there, but ultimately we are all stronger if Jerusalem is stronger. And here's the first lesson of a great teammate that we see here, is great teammates always see the big picture. Great teammates always see the big picture. And Jerusalem was so significant to them because that's where God's name rested, is on Jerusalem. 2 Chronicles chapter 6, verse 6 said this, "Now I have chosen Jerusalem for my name to be there." The Jewish people knew that in order for everybody in the world for God to have credibility to the people in the world, that Jerusalem had to be strong because that's where his name rested. They also knew this, that in order for their people to be strong, Jerusalem had to be in a very, very good place, even though they did not directly benefit from it. And so how has that played out for us? How does that apply to us? I'll tell you how. It played out with a man named Jake Kelly. Some of you may know Jake. They attended this church a few years back. They moved about 40 miles north of where our church is and began attending a church up there. So what does Jake do? He pours himself into that church, and his family pours themselves into that church. But you know what? He drove all the way down here for 2 weeks and provided his skills and some of his expertise to several of the projects that were happening around our facility, specifically in our children's space, as he was painting and drywalling and soundproofing rooms. Now, why did he do that? I asked him. He said, because I love the church. He loves this church, but not just this church and not just his church. He just loves the church, the universal church. And he could give in that time to his church up north, and that would have been really good, and I know that they do that. But he knows that, hey, when it comes to the universal church, like, we're better. We are all better when we are helping one another. That's a big picture type of view. He's a teammate not just of the people at his church, but he's a teammate of us here because he sees the big picture. And so he came down and he spent 2 weeks here serving. You know how else it played out for us here as we've been doing some work? You know how else it's played out with some people? I'll tell you. With some men by the name of Greg Spratlin, Bill McClarnon, Don Morgan. They don't have children in our children's ministry, grandchildren in our children's ministry. But you know what? They're up there painting rooms, cleaning out rooms, fixing up the facility to make it as nice as they can. Now, they could just focus in on their little area that affects them, but they realize, like, no. Even if my area is strong, that's not enough. I'm going to pour myself into some other spaces because you know what? We're all better when everybody is stronger. And so we have people like that are here. They're not just trying to focus on like their little space. It's like, no, we want the whole thing to be strong. We got volunteers up there serving. In our children's space, they don't have kids, grandkids. You got somebody like Rob Frank. He doesn't have children up there, but he loves the children. That's a great teammate because they see the big picture. And so the first great quality we see here is that people were willing to travel dozens of miles to pour themselves into Jerusalem, even though it didn't directly impact them. Man, when you're willing to invest yourself into spaces that you aren't necessarily going to directly benefit from, that is a quality, that is a sign of a great teammate. We go on, and we're going to read some more verses here. Uzziel, one of the goldsmiths, repaired the next section. Hanani, one of the perfume makers, made repairs next to that. They restored Jerusalem as far as the broad wall. The dung gate was repaired by Malchijah, ruler of the district of Beth Hakerem. He rebuilt it and put its doors with their bolts and bars in place. And between them, the room above the corner and the sheep gate, the goldsmiths and merchants made repairs. Now, allow me to make a little caveat here about the sheep gate. The sheep gate is where Nehemiah starts. It's also where Nehemiah ends. The sheep gate is where the lambs would come into the city, the sheep would come into the city that would ultimately be the sacrifices for the people for their sins. And so annually, the sheep were brought in through the sheep gate, taken up to the temple, ultimately sacrificed for the people's sins that they had committed. Warren Wiersbe, he says this is an incredible foreshadowing of Jesus because he is the ultimate sacrificial lamb for all of us. And in the same way that Nehemiah began with the sheep gate and ended with the sheep gate, Jesus said in Revelation chapter 1, I am the beginning and the end, the Alpha, the Omega, the first and the last. And as we consider doing a great work for God, as we consider really doing a great work for God, whatever that work may be, it has to begin and it has to end with Jesus. And Nehemiah didn't know he was doing this, but he started with the sheep gate. He started with where the lambs will be brought in, and he says, this is where we're going to begin, this is where we're going to end, and we're going to do this thing right, this great work of God. And that is so true when it comes to the work that we do for the Lord. We have to begin and end with Jesus. Now, as we specifically reference, getting back to the topic at hand, is perfume makers and goldsmiths. They put down their precious metals. They put down their fragrances. They picked up hammers and stones. The dung gate, that was where all the garbage, the refuse, the waste would exit the city, go into the valley of Gehenna, and it would be burned. It would be burned there. That wasn't necessarily, I don't think that was the first job people signed up for. But it was a necessary, critical job. Here's the point. Great teammates are willing to do any job. Great teammates are willing to do any job. Yeah, I may be a perfume maker, but you know what? I got to pick up a hammer and build something. I may not prefer to work on the dung gate, but I'm going to do it because it's a necessary thing to do. Great teammates are just willing to do any job. I played basketball growing up, and this was one of the most critical lessons I learned, and I wish I would have been reminded of it even in college, and I forgot it, but this was such a critical lesson for me to learn as I played basketball. Because in elementary school, middle school, freshman team, junior varsity team, I was always a scorer. I was one of the leading scorers, if not the leading scorer on my team. Every year, that's the way it was. And then I got on the varsity team and became a very prominent player when I was a junior. But our team was really good. We had several Division I basketball players on that team. Guess what that meant? They didn't need me to be a scorer anymore. We already had plenty of scorers. I had to find a new job, but it took me a long time to figure that out. And so I struggled for 12, 13 games that season trying to find my place on that team. And I was actually to the point where I was just about to be bounced out of the top first 8, which were really the only ones that played. And I almost got bounced out of that rotation until one game. Our coach threw me in, and somehow I ended up on their best player, guarding this other team's best player. I was in no way a defensive stopper, but I was aggravated. I wanted to figure this thing out. I wanted to be a good teammate. I wanted us to win. I wanted to contribute. I wanted to play. And so for the next 5 or 6 minutes, I did something I'd never done. I played the best defense I've ever played in my entire life. And immediately I found my new job on that team. And yeah, they needed me to score 6 or 7 points or 8 points a game. But above all else, they needed me to work really hard and to stop the other team's best guard. But it took me a while to figure out my job. And that was kind of humbling, and I didn't like that, and that's not the way I had been wired through the years of playing. But you know what? It helped us to win. Great teammates are always willing to do whatever they need to do to get the job done. Now, here, we don't have a dung gate, okay, at our church. But we do have restrooms that have a similar purpose. And we had several people working on our restrooms over the course of the last few months. You had people in there like Bill McLarnon, Tony and Zach McLarnon, Greg Bowman, Ted Peterson, Jack Gillay, Josh Bryant, Don Richardson, Tim Compton, Mike Galbraith, as well as many others that were in those restrooms working. And I can't even tell you how many times. We couldn't even keep track of how many times we put in the stalls and the panels and took the panels down and put them back in and took them down, took them to a place to get powder coated, brought them back, didn't look right, didn't smell right, that didn't make any sense. So we don't want them to smell like a dung gate. And so we took them back. And I mean, it was just this huge process, tons of work. I mean, appreciate so much those guys that were willing. I mean, we're experts. They are experts at taking them down, putting them back up. Ladies, appreciate you even more for allowing us to go a couple weeks without a I think 3 Sundays probably, that you didn't have a restroom here. Thank you for that. There you go. Well, they worked hard. And hard work pays off. We got people that were serving everywhere. I would pull into our parking lot, in the mornings, and some of you were showing up. I'm like, hey, what are you doing? Whatever you want me to do. Oh, well, I don't know what you should be doing. And so we would come inside, and we had guys working on the fireplace, floor, tile, cleaning out, cleaning up, throwing away, giving away, whatever else came up. People like Xavier Rubio, Rob Predelich, Steve Bond, Daniel Arzamendia, Brendan Cody, Debbie Muse, Bonnie O'Brien, Muhammad Alatbani, Jay Maxwell, David Grenoble, Brad Baldwin, Dante Saleo, Jaden Bryant, just to name a few. They're willing to do any job to get the job done. And that's what was happening here in Jerusalem. We go on in our text. Verse 12, Shalom, ruler of the half-district of Jerusalem, repaired the next section with the help of his daughters. And I love the fact that he involved his daughters. That's so incredible, that his family would look at this particular space of the wall and say, that was something that we had a part to play in. Here's what I think. Great teammates involve their whole family. Because when you involve your whole family, then that means that they don't feel like they're getting cheated. Because you're here doing a good work for the Lord, and they're not. And you know what? It's exciting. Families get excited about their church. They get excited about their faith whenever they get to come to a place and they get to experience it. Experience what it is that God is doing. And I think that's why Joshua, in Joshua 24:15, this is what he said. He says he's talking to the Israelites. He's about to just let them go and just say, all right, here's where we're at. You have to make a decision. We're at a crossroads here. You're going to follow God or you're not. And he says, as for me and my family, we will serve the Lord. And I just find it so intriguing, the language that he uses there. Because when it comes to how his family's relationship with God is going to be characterized, it's not by Bible study, important. Prayer, very important. Attending, going to the temple, important. Sacrifices in that day, very important. But when it comes to what his family was characterized by, it'd be service. He said, as for us, we will serve the Lord. And it's almost as if he's saying, like, if my family is going to stay true to God through all the temptations that we are going to encounter, we are going to serve the Lord together. And it was great. It's been great, and it will continue to be great to see families serving together in this church. I had a was here on a Saturday morning helping out a little bit. Was so excited to see Brady Wilson and his 13-year-old son Jeffrey upstairs moving furniture, running saws, cutting wood, helping to soundproof rooms. They were doing it together. Abby Fowler, 7-year-old daughter of Cindy Fowler, upstairs painting hallways together. The Peterson family, they had 4 generations working on this church. You have Ted Peterson, Robert Peterson, Russell Peterson, and Andikai Peterson. And little Andy, he's like 2 years old. He's carrying a piece of wood. 4 generations. I'm sorry. Ted, I hope that doesn't make you feel old. I'm sorry. 4 generations, though. That's incredible. Husbands and wives here serving together. Josh and Jill Bryant, Mike and Sue Galbraith, Don, Jeannie Richardson, Denny and Melissa Fisher, Jeff, Lynette, Valentine painting. Families. Great teammates. And it's not always possible. Don't feel bad if it's not possible. But it's a great thing when it can happen. Nehemiah, he makes reference of this family that served together, and he goes on. Adjoining this, Jedediah made repairs opposite his house. Hattush made repairs next to him. Beyond them, Benjamin and Hasad made repairs in front of their house. And next to them, Azariah made repairs beside his house. Above the horse gate, the priests made repairs, each in front of his own house. Next to them, Zadok made repairs opposite his house. And just notice there that they were doing things near where they lived. You see, the big picture thing is important, okay? We can't just focus in on our area and then forget about other people that we can help out. But at the same time, we still have to take responsibility for our space. Like, if you neglect that thing, if you neglect it, it's going to affect everybody. And so these people are pouring into these areas. They're building the wall up around where they live. Here's the point. Great teammates take responsibility for their areas of responsibility. And we've had that with Flying Colors. We still have that, not even just in the work that's being done in the building, and I'll talk about some of those people, but even in the ministries here at the church. So many of you pouring into areas that are very critical and personal to you. But specifically, we had people like Salem Webb, Lynette Valentine, Amy Harder, Mike McGuire here late at night, cleaning up rooms and painting in our children's area. We also had closets that were just full of stuff, all kinds of stuff, for children's ministry type of stuff. And so Shelly Lozano spent just days here cleaning stuff out, throwing stuff away, giving things away, things that we haven't used in years, but we didn't know it. And so we're just cleaning out things because that's like an area of passion for her. We had people, this worship space, we've had people in here working hard. You had people like Kelvin Gillette, Bob Santos, Zach Harder, Nikel Peterson, Aaron Angel working on a variety of jobs around this room, trying to get it enhanced, especially Aaron Angel. I mean, this guy's done so much in here. He's helped to paint these grids. Everything up here was white until he got a hold of it, and he started painting it black. He helped to hang the baffles. He helped to redo the lighting. He helped take down screens, put back screens, take down projectors, put up projectors. I mean, Aaron's done incredible, amazing work. You got to take responsibility. We had teens upstairs painting, teenagers upstairs painting in our student ministry space, and they were having a blast. They got almost as much paint on the walls as they did on themselves. We had several volunteers and interns helping as well. Matt Kahn, Brandon Chastain, Parker Reed, Connor Grisham, Jackie Robson. Such a blessing to have people taking ownership of spaces that they serve in and that they help in. It's important to take responsibility for areas that we're responsible for. Going on, Nehemiah, he says, Meremoth repaired the next section. Next to him, Meshullam made repairs, and next to him, Zadok also made repairs. The next section was repaired by the men of Tekoa, but their nobles would not put their shoulders to the work under their supervisors. Next to him, Meremoth, again, repaired another section from the entrance of Elishashib's, I promise I didn't cuss there, house to the end of it. Next to them, the men of Tekoa repaired another section from the great projecting tower to the wall of Ophel. I think you noticed there you had multiple names getting mentioned here for multiple sections. Great teammates do more than is required of them. They didn't just do some of the work. They did extra work. They didn't just do one section. They did multiple sections. And we've had people here just pouring themselves into what's going on. Even, again, and not just into the work of the building, but even into ministries, just constantly wanting to give themselves out. Great teammates always do more than is required of them. We've had this with the Peterson family, okay? You had, specifically with Robert Peterson. He's the one that managed quite a bit of this project. Encouraged that guy. He had to manage a lot of this and all the personalities and trying to get people to come in to, give us products that we were installing. He had a lot of work to a lot there to kind of keep straight. He was often coming here on Saturdays, putting extra time to make sure things were cleaned up so that way Sunday could happen. He did a great job. You had Ted Peterson here, Mary Peterson here. Mary's showing people around the building, showing everything off, helping people that for our midweek stuff, Ollie, making it to their classrooms that we have going here. Did great. More than was required of them. Great teammates. You had we had a design team, okay? Yeah, a design team that we had. Jeannie Richardson, Sue Galbraith, Melissa Fisher, Laura Holland, Deb Engel, a few others popped in periodically. And the reason I say this, the design team, they were tasked with making decisions about color, design, look, layout. That was their job. Okay, but here's the thing. Here's why it was, every decision they made got criticized. Every decision, okay? And it was always minor. It's like, well, it could have been a shade lighter, a shade darker, a little more gray, a little less gray, a little more wood, a little less wood. It was like floor. Everything got criticism. And it wasn't always from the same people. It was different people. So that made it even more overwhelming. But that's a hard job. And great teammates are willing to do more than is expected of them. And, but above all else, the guys that did, two guys that just really killed it. We're here constantly. Don Richardson and Mike Galbraith. And you don't know this, but man, they deserve a hand. Man, the amount of, you have no idea the amount of time that, because you have a job. And you're working. These guys, this was their job for the last couple of months. And, again, there's still more to be done. But, these guys were killing themselves to do it. And lots of names. And I know I didn't mention every name, and I apologize for that. I may not have mentioned it, and maybe I didn't see something that you did, but God did. God did see. And here's the lesson from Nehemiah 3, is that when it comes to rebuilding the wall in Jerusalem, no one person could have done it by themselves. It took a team of people willing to come together, demonstrating great qualities of being a teammate to get this great work for the Lord done. And that's the lesson for us as a church, that no church can truly do the work that God is calling them to do if they don't come together and do it together. It is absolutely impossible. But if we're willing to come together to be great teammates, and we can truly make an impact for the Lord. And God has promised us this. He's promised us this. He says the work for the Lord is not done in vain. 1 Corinthians chapter 15 says, "Therefore, my dear brothers and sisters, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain." And sometimes it may not seem like that, but we have great victory in Christ, okay? No matter how defeated we might feel, we are not defeated because we are more than conquerors in Him. And the work that we do for Him is never, ever in vain. And so thank you very much for all that you have done. I will certainly appreciate more often into the future, and I think that this is an important thing, a very valuable thing to mention people, to recognize people, to encourage you along in your service. But with that, let's have a word of prayer, and we're going to continue in our service. Thank you, Father, for this group of people that you've brought here. Lord, it's such an honor to share names of people that are serving you so faithfully. And so I pray that you would encourage their hearts. I pray, Father, for great fruit to come from their labors. Lord, that we continue to be the church that you are calling us to be. In Jesus' name, amen.